Okay, class. Welcome to electronic field production. Actually, this is called field production and editing, MCM 330. And where field production is concerned, typically we're discussing EFP, electronic field production. However, there are some times we'll be discussing ENG, electronic news gathering. I want to talk to you a little bit today about the beginning pieces. We're going to discuss right now the communication model. In field production and editing, the communication model is in play just like anywhere else. When we talk about field production and editing, it's easy for us to get focused on cameras and microphones and lighting equipment and editing and all those things. But underneath all those tools, the most important thing that we can have is communication. Every video you produce is an act of communication. You have a message, you have an audience, and you have a series of production choices to move that message from the person creating it to the person receiving it. All right, so let's discuss how this works. The basic communication model. At its most basic point, it involves a sender, a message, a channel, a receiver, and then feedback. The sender is the person or the organization initiating the communication. The message is the information intended, the idea, the story, or the emotion being communicated. The channel is the medium used to deliver the message, and the receiver is the audience interpreting the message. Feedback is what tells us whether the message was understood, accepted, rejected, or possibly misunderstood. There's also a very important element that we have to discuss as well, and that element is called noise. Noise is anything that interferes with the successful transfer of the message. In field production, noise can be literal, such as traffic, wind, or bad microphones. It also can be visual, technical, organizational, or even conceptual. For example, if an interview subject gives an excellent answer, but the audio is distorted and the communication is damaged, you have noise. If the audio is perfect, but the camera is poorly composed, you have noise. If the editor removes an important piece of information the audience may receive and it makes the message completely different than what was initially intended, you have noise. So what we want to do is always identify things that can create noise. Our phones create noise. The environment creates noise. If we are using excessive jargon, that actually can become noise. You want to have harmony in the sending of the message, meaning that I'm speaking in English and you all understand English. If I was speaking a language that you didn't understand, the fact that we don't speak the same language is just a form of noise. The producer, as the sender, is the next area we'll discuss. In field production, the producer often functions as the sender. Before you ever turn on the camera, you should know what you're trying to communicate. You'll ask yourself these following things. What is the story? Who needs to hear it? What do I want the audience to understand, feel, or do after watching? This is why pre-production is so important. We'll discuss pre-production and the other stages of production later. A producer who goes into the field without understanding the message may come back with hours of footage but no coherent story. Good production starts with and ends with communications planning. The producer determines the purpose of the story and identifies the audience, develops questions, selects locations, determines what visuals are needed, and decides what information must be captured. The camera and the microphone are not simply pieces of equipment, they're in fact communications channels. The camera communicates through images, the microphone communicates with sound. Lighting communicates the mood, emphasis, and visibility. Framing communicates the decisions about what the audience should see and should not see. Consider an interview. If you use a tight shot of someone's face, you're telling the audience that the person's expression is important. If you use a wide shot, you are showing that the person is in a particular environment. you're communicating information about the surroundings. If you place a subject in darkness or use dramatic lighting or shoot from an unusual angle, you are creating additional meaning. These are communication decisions. Field production adds another layer to these decisions. Field production interviews is an important challenge. You do not have complete control over the environment. You may have unexpected background noise, the weather may change, the subject may become uncomfortable, lighting may change, people might walk through the shot. Your microphone may pick up other sounds, whether it's an airplane or air conditioner or a passing vehicle. All of these things can become noise in a communications process. That's why professionals constantly monitor the environment. You're not simply recording reality, you're making decisions about the reality and how that reality will be communicated to the audience. Now, consider the interview. The interview is one of the most important communication tools in the field. The interviewer is the sender, and the interview subject is also communicating directly with the audience. That means the producer has to listen carefully, taking notes to make certain that the producer can help extract what is important about the interview and then continue to move through the interview with follow-up questions. So for instance, you hear something very interesting that the interviewee says, you may want to follow up with, what do you mean by that? Or can you give me an example? Why is that important? The goal is not to simply collect answers, but to get the answers and create a meaningful exchange between you or the interviewer and the interviewee so that the home viewer will feel compelled to continue to watch and be interested in the product. Now let's move to editing. Editing has the ability to change communication. When you edit, you're deciding what the audience will see, hear, and understand. Imagine you have to record a 30-minute interview, but your final story may only use 45 seconds of that interview. You therefore have hundreds of communication decisions to make. You decided what information is most important, what should come first, and what order things should go in, the cuts, the images that you want, and if there's going to be music, graphics, sound effects, or narration to help carry the interview. Every one of these decisions can change the message. Editing, therefore, is not simply the process of making the video shorter. Editing effectively is the process of concise storytelling. Continuity and audience understanding is the next piece that we should be concerned with. Good editing helps the receiver understand the message without any additional or unnecessary confusion. This is where continuity becomes important. The audience should generally understand who is speaking, where they are, what is happening, and why does it matter. In traditional communication models, feedback becomes an important message that's returned to the sender from the receiver. In media production, feedback can happen throughout the process. A producer might receive feedback from a client, a director might receive feedback from the subject, an editor may receive feedback from the producer. All these parts play a vital role in the communication process. Ultimately, the audience provides feedback through a myriad of ways. They either watch, and therefore they affect your ratings, they comment, they have engagement, or they can just continue to watch. Feedback helps you determine whether the communication was successful. A technically perfect production can still fail if the audience does not understand the message. In conclusion, field production and editing are ultimately exercises in communication. You want to have a producer develop the message, the crew captures the message. The camera, microphone, and all those other pieces are the channel through which the message is captured. The editor organizes the information. The audience receives and interprets the final product. So, let's continue to understand one thing. Every shot communicates, every sound communicates, every edit communicates, and every production choice should have a purpose, and it should fill the communications model. Again, The areas of communication of the communication model include a sender, a message, a channel, a receiver, and feedback.